What happens when a simple piece of jewelry becomes the key that unlocks 47 years of family secrets? When a billionaire grandmother's recognition of a vintage bracelet exposes the lies that tore apart 3 generations of women. For Lucia Santos, a 25-year-old waitress at La Fontana, Beverly Hills' most exclusive Mediterranean restaurant, that moment came on a quiet Tuesday evening when philanthropist Margaret Whitfield noticed the antique gold bracelet Lucia had worn every day since childhood. For Margaret, a woman who'd spent nearly 5 decades searching for the granddaughter stolen from her, it was the answer to prayers she'd almost given up hope would be answered. She was just serving wine to another wealthy patron who saw service workers as invisible furniture. Margaret was just another aging billionaire dining alone, mourning the family she'd lost to betrayal and greed. But when Margaret's trembling fingers traced the intricate engravings on Lucia's bracelet, engravings that spelled out a name and date she'd memorized through decades of grief, both women would discover that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't money or influence, but the unbreakable bond between a grandmother and the granddaughter she never stopped loving. This isn't a story about coincidence. This is about stolen childhoods, manufactured deaths, and how sometimes the smallest details can bring down the biggest lies. The soft murmur of conversation and gentle clink of crystal glasses filled the elegant dining room of La Fontana as Lucia Santos moved between tables with practiced grace. At 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, the restaurant catered to Beverly Hills elite, movie producers, tech executives, old money families who'd been dining here for decades. Lucia had worked at La Fontana for 3 years, long enough to recognize the subtle hierarchies among the wealthy. Some treated her with polite indifference, others with casual condescension, and a rare few with actual kindness. She'd learned to read the signs early, adjusting her approach to maximize tips while maintaining her dignity. Table 12 had requested a quiet corner away from the main dining area. The reservation was for Margaret Whitfield, a name that commanded instant respect from the restaurant's management. At 71, Margaret was one of California's most influential philanthropists, her family's telecommunications fortune enabling her to fund hospitals, schools, and cultural institutions across the state. Margaret sat alone at the elegantly appointed table, her silver hair perfectly styled and her navy dress understated but expensive. She moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades in the public eye, but Lucia noticed something melancholy in her pale blue eyes, a sadness that wealth couldn't mask. "Good evening, Mrs. Whitfield," Lucia said, approaching with a wine list. "Welcome back to La Fontana." Margaret looked up with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, dear. I'll have my usual, the 2015 Barolo, just a glass." As Lucia wrote down the order, Margaret's gaze fell on her wrist. The elderly woman's expression changed so dramatically that Lucia paused, following Margaret's stare to the antique gold bracelet she'd worn every day since she was 8 years old. The bracelet was distinctive, delicate gold links connected to a small oval plate engraved with intricate script. It had belonged to Lucia's adoptive mother, Carmen Santos, who'd given it to her before dying of cancer when Lucia was 16. Carmen had always said it was Lucia's real mother's bracelet, the only thing she'd been wearing when she was found. As a baby, Margaret's hand moved to her throat, her face draining of color. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That bracelet, where did you get it?" Lucia instinctively stepped back, noting the intensity in Margaret's eyes. "It was my mother's. Is something wrong?" Margaret's hands began to tremble as she reached into her purse, withdrawing a small leather jewelry box. With shaking fingers, she opened it to reveal an identical bracelet. The same gold links, the same oval plate, the same intricate engravings. "What does yours say?" Margaret asked, her voice thick with emotion. "The engraving, what does it say?" Lucia looked down at her bracelet, reading the words she'd memorized long ago. Isabella Rose, March 15th, 1999. Margaret's intake of breath was sharp and painful. She held up her own bracelet with trembling hands. Lucia Marie, March 15th, 1999. The dining room seemed to spin around Lucia as the implications sank in. 2 identical bracelets, 2 names, the same date. "I don't understand," she whispered. Tears were streaming down Margaret's cheeks now, her careful composure completely abandoned. "Twins," she breathed. "You were twins, my granddaughters, born March 15th, 1999, to my daughter Catherine." The words hit Lucia like physical blows. Twins. She had a sister named Isabella Rose, and this woman, this billionaire philanthropist, was claiming to be her grandmother. "That's impossible," Lucia said, sinking into the chair across from Margaret. "I was found as a baby. I was adopted. My birth parents were never identified." Margaret's eyes blazed with a mixture of grief and fury. "Your birth parents weren't unknown. They were murdered. And you and your sister were stolen from your cribs and sold to different families to cover up the crime." The accusation was so shocking that Lucia couldn't process it. "Murdered, sold? Mrs. Whitfield, you're not making sense." Margaret composed herself with visible effort, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "I'm sorry, this is overwhelming for both of us. But Lucia, I've been searching for you and your sister for 25 years. These bracelets, I had them made when you were born, one for each of my granddaughters." She reached across the table and gently touched Lucia's bracelet. "I engraved them myself. Isabella Rose for one baby, Lucia Marie for the other. They were the only things you were wearing when you disappeared." Lucia's mind raced, trying to reconcile this impossible story with everything she'd believed about her past. "Who were my parents? What happened to them?" Margaret's expression hardened. "Your mother was my daughter Catherine. Your father was Marcus Rodriguez, a wonderful young man who loved Catherine more than life itself. They were both 23 years old, newly married, absolutely devoted to you girls. Then why don't I remember them? Why was I found alone as a baby?" "Because my son-in-law, Catherine's stepfather, arranged for their deaths when Catherine discovered something that threatened his political career." Margaret's voice was steady now, cold with decades of suppressed rage. "William Blackwood couldn't afford to have his stepdaughter expose his corruption, so he had her and Marcus killed and arranged for you girls to disappear into the foster system under false identities." The name Blackwood made Lucia's blood run cold. William Blackwood was California's senior senator, a powerful political figure who'd been in office for over 30 years. The idea that he was connected to her family's destruction was overwhelming. "Senator Blackwood killed my parents," Lucia whispered. "Senator Blackwood ordered their deaths," Margaret corrected. "He had help, corrupt officials who falsified records, adoption agencies that asked no questions, social workers who were paid to look the other way. It was a conspiracy that reached into every level of government." Margaret pulled out her phone and showed Lucia a photograph. It showed a young woman with dark hair, holding 2 identical babies, standing beside a young man with kind eyes. The woman looked remarkably like Lucia. "This was taken 3 days before they were murdered," Margaret said softly. "Catherine and Marcus with their 6-month-old daughters. You can see how happy they were, how much they loved you girls." Lucia stared at the photograph, seeing her own features reflected in her mother's face. For the first time in her life, she was looking at her biological parents, and the love in their expressions was unmistakable. "Why didn't you find us sooner?" Lucia asked. "With your resources, your connections." "I tried," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "I hired private investigators, contacted every adoption agency in the country, even offered $1 million rewards for information. But Blackwood's conspiracy was too complete. You and Isabella were given new identities, placed with families in different states, and all official records were destroyed or falsified. She reached into her purse and withdrew a thick folder. I never stopped looking. 25 years of investigation, dead-end leads, false hopes, until tonight. Lucia opened the folder to find hundreds of documents. Investigative reports, financial records, correspondence with adoption agencies. The scope of Margaret's search was staggering. I've spent my entire fortune trying to find you, Margaret continued. Every private investigator, every database search, every possible lead. I was beginning to think I'd never see either of you again. What about Isabella? Lucia asked. My sister, do you know where she is? Margaret's expression grew even more pained. I found Isabella 2 years ago. She was living in Portland, working as a teacher. Her adoptive family had given her the name Emma Rodriguez. Lucia noticed the past tense immediately. She died in a car accident 6 months ago, Margaret said, fresh tears flowing. Just as I was preparing to approach her, to tell her the truth about her past. The timing was too convenient, too coincidental. I believe Blackwood discovered I'd found her and had her eliminated before I could reveal his crimes. The news hit Lucia like a physical blow. She'd just learned she had a twin sister, only to discover that Isabella was dead, possibly murdered by the same man who'd destroyed their family 25 years earlier. He killed her, Lucia said, her voice flat with shock. Just like he killed our parents. I believe so, Margaret confirmed, which is why I've been so careful about investigating further. Blackwood has killed 3 members of our family. He won't hesitate to kill again if he feels threatened. Lucia looked around the elegant dining room, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. Should we be talking about this here? Margaret nodded toward 2 men in dark suits sitting at the bar. Those are my security team. They've been protecting me since Isabella's death. But Lucia, now that I've found you, you're in danger. 2, the weight of the situation was crushing. In the space of an hour, Lucia had learned that she was the granddaughter of a billionaire, that her parents had been murdered, that she'd had a twin sister who was also dead, and that a powerful senator wanted her eliminated to protect his secrets. What do we do now? Lucia asked. Margaret's expression hardened with determination. Now we get justice for your parents and your sister. I've spent 25 years gathering evidence against Blackwood. Tonight, we finish what Catherine started. She pulled out another document from her folder, a letter in faded ink, written in a young woman's handwriting. Catherine wrote this 3 days before she was killed, Margaret said. She discovered that Blackwood was taking bribes from defense contractors, using his position on the Armed Services Committee to steer contracts to companies that paid him millions. She was going to expose him. Lucia read the letter, seeing her mother's intelligence and courage in every line. Catherine had documented Blackwood's corruption in meticulous detail, creating a paper trail that would have destroyed his career. She hid copies of everything, Margaret continued. Financial records, recorded phone calls, photographs of documents. She knew Blackwood was dangerous, so she created an insurance policy. Where is this evidence? Hidden in a safety deposit. A box that only opened with 2 keys, one that Catherine gave to me before she died, and one that she hid with you girls when you were taken. Margaret looked pointedly at Lucia's bracelet. I believe your bracelet contains the 2nd key. Lucia examined her bracelet more closely, noticing for the first time that the oval plate was actually 2 pieces held together by tiny screws. Inside the engraving, Catherine was brilliant, Margaret said with pride. She knew that anyone looking for evidence would search obvious places. But who would think to look inside a baby's bracelet? Working together, they carefully unscrewed the oval plate. Inside was a small cavity containing a miniature key and a folded piece of paper with a series of numbers. the safety deposit box location and number. 25 years, Margaret whispered, holding the key. 25 years of searching, and the answer was with you all along. Before they could discuss their next move, one of Margaret's security guards approached their table with urgency. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said quietly, "we have a problem. Senator Blackwood just arrived at the restaurant. He's asking specifically about your table." Margaret's face went pale. He knows. Somehow he knows I've found her. Lucia felt panic rising in her chest. "What do we do?" "We don't run," Margaret said firmly. "I'm tired of being afraid of that monster. It's time to end this." She pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "Detective Morrison? This is Margaret. Whitfield, I'm ready to turn over the evidence we discussed. Yes, all of it. And I have a witness, my granddaughter, Lucia Santos." As Margaret finished her call, Senator William Blackwood entered their section of the restaurant. At 68, he still commanded attention. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, radiating the confidence of a man who'd wielded power for decades. But when his eyes fell on Lucia, his expression changed. The resemblance to Catherine was unmistakable, and Blackwood's political instincts told him exactly what he was looking at. "Margaret," he said smoothly, approaching their table, "what an unexpected pleasure, and this must be your young friend." "This is my granddaughter," Margaret said, her voice carrying clearly through the restaurant. "Lucia Santos, daughter of Catherine Whitfield and Marcus Rodriguez." The effect of the announcement was immediate. Other diners turned to listen, and Blackwood's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Catherine's children died with their parents in that tragic accident." "There was no accident," Lucia said, standing to face the man who destroyed her family. "You had my parents murdered because my mother discovered your corruption." Blackwood's eyes darted around the restaurant, noting the growing attention from other diners and staff. "That's a very serious accusation to make without proof." Margaret smiled, coldly. "Oh, we have proof, 25 years' worth. Financial records, recorded conversations, documented bribes, everything Catherine collected before you had her killed." She held up the key they'd just removed from Lucia's bracelet. "And tomorrow morning, Detective Morrison will be opening the safety deposit box where Catherine hid the evidence that will send you to prison for the rest of your life." Blackwood's political mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cornered predator beneath. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Margaret. I've been protecting this state's interests for 30 years. A few inconvenient deaths don't change that." "Inconvenient deaths." Lucia's voice rose with fury. "You murdered my parents. You stole my sister and me from our family. You killed Isabella when she got too close to the truth." The dining room had gone completely silent now, with several patrons discreetly recording the confrontation on their phones. Blackwood realized that his career was ending in real time, broadcast to the world through social media. "Even if any of this were true," he said desperately, "it was a long time ago. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to murder," Detective Morrison announced, entering the restaurant with a team of officers. "William Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, bribery, and corruption." As Blackwood was led away in handcuffs, his 3-decade political career effectively over, Margaret and Lucia found themselves surrounded by reporters and police officers. But for a moment, grandmother and granddaughter simply held each other, feeling the weight of 25 years of separation finally lifted. "Catherine would be so proud of you," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You have her courage, her integrity, her strength." "And I have you," Lucia replied. "Finally, I have family." The evidence in Catherine's safety deposit box was even more damning than Margaret had hoped. Not only did it document Blackwood's corruption, but it also revealed a network of officials who'd helped cover up the murders and arrange the illegal adoptions. Within months, a dozen people were arrested, and the conspiracy that had hidden the truth for 25 years was completely exposed. Lucia left her job at La Fontana and moved into Margaret's estate, finally experiencing the family life that had been stolen from her as a baby. She also enrolled in law school, determined to help other families torn apart by powerful people's crimes. Together, they established the Catherine and Marcus Rodriguez Foundation, dedicated to investigating cold cases involving missing children and corrupt officials. The foundation's first success was solving the accidental death of Isabella Rodriguez in Portland, proving that Blackwood had ordered her murder when she'd begun asking questions about her adoption. On the first anniversary of their reunion, Margaret and Lucia visited the cemetery where Catherine, Marcus, and Isabella were buried together. Margaret had moved Isabella's body from Portland so the family could finally be united. "I used to come here every week," Margaret said, placing flowers on the graves, talking to Catherine, telling her I hadn't given up looking for her daughters. "She knew," Lucia said, touching the repaired bracelet on her wrist. "Somehow she knew you'd find me. That's why she hid the key where only you would think to look." Margaret smiled, looking at her granddaughter with pride. "You know, you're not just Catherine's daughter. You're also carrying on her legacy, fighting for justice, protecting the innocent, refusing to let powerful people escape the consequences of their crimes." "It's what families do," Lucia said. "We protect each other even across time." As they left the cemetery together, Margaret felt a peace she hadn't known in 25 years. The bracelet that had revealed a family secret hadn't just brought her granddaughter home. It had delivered justice for Catherine, Marcus, and Isabella, and ensured that their deaths wouldn't be forgotten. Lucia's story reminds us that love transcends time, that justice may be delayed but cannot be denied, and that sometimes the smallest details, a bracelet, an engraving, a hidden key, can bring down the mightiest corruptions. Her reunion with Margaret proved that family bonds are stronger than the lies meant to break them, and that the truth, once revealed, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. The bracelet that brought a family home had carried more than just a key. It had carried the promise that love endures, that the innocent will be protected, and that those who use their power to destroy families will ultimately face the consequences of their crimes. Lucia's journey reminds us that the smallest details can change everything. A bracelet, an engraving, a key hidden in plain sight. It's proof that love endures across decades, that truth always finds a way to surface, and that family bonds are stronger than any lies meant to bury them. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in justice, in hope, and in second chances. And don't just let this story end here. Subscribe to the channel and become part of a community where we keep uncovering narratives of courage, resilience, and love that refuses to die. Because sometimes the most powerful legacies are not measured in wealth or influence, but in the truth we fight to protect and the families we bring back together.